Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your wearing my flannel because there's a storm coming host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, to which we've been told former President Donald Trump will be making a triumphant return. Also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Well, I guess we could bother to tell you there's a snow emergency tonight, but if you can't figure that out, but then again, in this city, when they don't call snow emergencies, in my opinion, when they should, I suppose it might not be a bad idea. Well, speaking of the storm, I have to tell you, one of the things that has amazed me the older I get is how timid we all have become in the face of snowstorms, which happen on a regular basis here in the Granite State. Global warming notwithstanding, it still gets cold here. It still snows here. We still get sleet and freezing rain. And it amazes me how people now lose their mind with every approaching storm, how grocery stores are overrun and blown out, how people cancel things, sometimes days in advance of a reported storm, and how everything comes to a complete and grinding halt. Now, maybe this is just me, the New Hampshire kid, the Manchester boy who was born and raised here, and remembers what it was like, just like, yeah, okay, it's snowing. Add a few, add extra time to your drive, be a little careful, blah, blah, blah. Now to see people totally freaking out with every approaching storm. Nonetheless, we shall carry on. We shall soldier on because, well, we're used to it. And, we've been here before. What can we say? All right, we have a show tonight. And I'm going to tell you that it's going to be focused on the continued homeless trials here in the city of Manchester. 603-640-3091 if you want to call. 603-640-3091. So I am going to go over because, in every article, in every interview, in everything that comes out now, there is more and more evidence of what I consider to be the problem with how the city has approached this homeless issue, and how, and which really underscores how it's gotten worse with every passing day. So I was talking to somebody today who's like, "Hey, have you seen all of the homeless people wandering Elm Street now that they've broken up the camp?" Actually, no, I haven't seen that, but I guess one could expect that to happen. And I have to tell you that, at the risk of sounding insensitive and cold, our idea of compassion and how to treat these people is as wrong-headed as it can possibly be. And we're going to go over some of that tonight. So if you've been following this story, since we met last, the ACLU rode in on its broom to save the day for the homeless people, filing a lawsuit to prevent the city from dispersing the camp, which had grown to at least 50 people by the time it was cleared, on the sidewalk outside of the homeless shelter at the corner of Pine and Manchester Streets. That's not a very big area for people in tents, 50 people in tents, where at least 2 people have died. Over the weekend, another man was found dead in a tent. No foul play expected, if I remember the article correctly. Probably yet another drug overdose. And as Mayor Craig herself has said, the homeless population is responsible for half of the overdose deaths here in the city in the last year, which, if you think about it, while sad, kind of underscores what I have been saying about the nature of the vagrants on the street, and that is they are overwhelmingly 90+% drug addicts or mentally ill, or or most likely both, because their mental illness is causing them to self-medicate, or their drug use has caused them to be mentally ill. I'm not trying to be flip. I'm trying to be real about the population that's out there on the streets, many of whom, if you read the articles that are published in various publications, have got families that would welcome them home if they would enter into treatment for either their mental illness or their drug abuse or both. And no, you're not going to hear me refer to them as unsheltered or unhoused. You're not going to hear me refer to them as substance misuse disorder victims. You're not going to hear me refer to them by any of the parlance that is out there in the politically correct realm, trying to change people's perceptions of what of who these people, what these people in some instances really are, so that we will continue to look at them through a lens that says, well, they have problems, and we need to be compassionate, and we need to accommodate them. No, we don't. In fact, if we cannot impose our rules of public order through the ordinances of Manchester and the laws of the state of New Hampshire, then what is the point of having those laws? Because they certainly aren't there to restrain the housed population that isn't engaging in any of the graphic behaviors, whether it's what bodily functions are being relieved or engaged outside of daycare centers in the downtown, the drug use, the fighting, the violence, etc. Just even the litter. Has it ever dawned on anybody what happens when these camps are shut down? And the people who have to come in hazmat suits, the front loaders, the backhoes, not backhoes, but the heavy equipment, the dump trucks, the sheer volume of trash and the squalor that's left behind. I'll tell you something about what these camps really are. They are, they're the Wild West. Anything goes, and we're going to get into that tonight. So, I'm going to start with a couple articles that have appeared in the Union Leader regarding this issue. We're going to get into a bit of what the governor has done to respond to the 8 mayors, including the fearless Joyce Craig, the honorable mayor of Manchester. And then I'm going to share with you an interview that, Boulogne, what's her first name? Anyway, she is the new director of homeless initiatives here in the city of Manchester. She did an interview with Adam Sexton on Channel 9. We have to go through that because the stuff that she says it proves to me anyway that it's going to be staying on course here in the Queen City. Although it is clear that she is bending to the political will of a mayor and a board of mayor and aldermen who are coming into an election season and are scared to death at how public opinion has turned on them for how they've allowed the homeless problem, which, it didn't start under Joyce Craig, and people making that accusation and making that case are just wrong. But it certainly has gotten worse under Joyce Craig, and we ought to deal with that reality rather than jump to claims that are easy to diffuse and otherwise undermine the arguments. So this was from Wednesday's paper after the court actually ruled, much to my surprise, in favor of the city. And the judge writes, considering the grave risks to public health and safety posed by the ongoing presence of the encampment on public sidewalks in downtown Manchester and the availability of safe alternatives for the people living in the encampment, a temporary restraining order is not justified in this case. Now, of course, this guy named Damn Right, who is a homeless advocate, these people have no place to go and they're going to end up someplace that cannot possibly be better than where they are at right now. Well, they do have some place to go, Mr. Right. It's called drug rehab. It's called mental health treatment. It's called back to the families that will take them back if they are willing to get themselves cleaned up. But as we saw in last week's show, where I had Robert from the streets of Manchester, who was a member of that encampment and was a member of the encampment on the courthouse lawn in downtown Manchester before then, said, we don't want to be in shelters. We don't want to have to follow the rules. We want to be able to do our drugs and basically live how we want to live. And it's up to you to find a way for us to do that. Yeah. But the reality of the situation here is, well, look, people who won't comply with the city's request will be issued civil citations. Well, civil citations? One resident has received 3 so far for blocking the sidewalk. If he can't get to court or pay the fine, he'll be issued a bench warrant. Now, I'm going to admit that I don't know the ins and outs of law enforcement here, but if you've been told to clear the sidewalk because you're blocking it and you failed to do that, it seems to me that you ought to be in for a criminal citation, not a civil citation, for refusing to do what you're being told to do lawfully by a police officer. Is that trespassing? Is that disorderly conduct? I'm pretty sure they can come up with something that would let them cool their heels at Valley Street. And frankly, as you know, I'm not opposed to folks who break the law, especially if they're drug addicts or they're mentally ill or they're both, having time to cool their heels at Valley Street. Of course, in order for that to work, I guess the state has got to fix the catch and release bail law that Joyce Craig supported back in 2017, as so many other people did, frankly, bizarrely. But hey, that's what the ACLU wanted. So the ACLU's acolytes did what the ACLU told them to do, just like they've been doing in this homeless situation until the pressure from the public gets too hot for the politicians to handle. But, oh my God, they'll be issued a bench warrant for violating the law. Bench warrant means that's a warrant for their arrest. Well, they should be. Okay, we have to start really asking ourselves again the question, is it up to the city or any community to make sure that people are accommodated and made sure that before laws are enforced, they're given every opportunity through outreach and, whatever, to get their, to get a shelter bed, to get transitional housing, to do this, to do that. Sometimes, and again, my brother-in-law, homeless in Boston for over 2 decades, when he goes to jail, all the stuff that he doesn't want to do, he does because he has to, because he's there. And that includes taking the medication for his mental illness. It includes not drinking or not doing coke or whatever else it is he does. It includes going to his AA meetings. So rehab, detox, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Where the system fails routinely, my brother-in-law, it fails people here in New Hampshire too, and that is once they're released, there is very poor follow-up. And as we discussed in our show last week, every county should have a plan for the residents released from jail so model prisoners from Carroll County don't end up dead on the streets of Manchester on Christmas Eve because Carroll County doesn't have the facilities to take someone like that in and keep them on the path to recovery. Anyway, city employees and nonprofit partners have been working around the clock to ensure the health and safety of both the individuals experiencing homelessness in Manchester and the community at large. And this morning, the Hillsborough County Superior Court acknowledged our progress and ruled in favor of our ability to continue this work. So said Mayor Joyce Craig in a statement released. Really. Isn't it interesting? They're experiencing homelessness. Has it dawned on you? I mean, one of the things that really struck me when I was doing the research for the, homeless vagrancy proposals that I put together when I was running for mayor last year, it really dawned on me how many of these people simply are choosing to live in tents, whether they're in a park, on a sidewalk, under a bridge, in the woods somewhere, basically so they can do drugs. I mean, that's the end story. Why don't they like the shelters? Because the shelters have rules. And the shelter doesn't allow you to fornicate. It doesn't allow you to shoot up. It doesn't allow you to snort. It doesn't allow you to pop pills. It doesn't allow you to drink. Okay? Although, and sometimes they don't take you if you are, stoned or otherwise cocked up. So that's okay. Joyce, we're working so hard for those people who are experiencing homelessness as if it's not their fault. I got to tell you, in my opinion, it's their fault. And if it's their fault, it's not my responsibility to get them off the streets. And even if it isn't their fault, why would it be the responsibility of the city to make sure they were provided with the services they needed? honestly, it's a bridge too far. And no matter how valiant your efforts, if it's not something you should be doing, you're ultimately not going to be successful. Last Friday, officials announced the launch of the Manchester Winter Relief Fund, designed to ensure services and shelter to unhoused individuals in the city, according to the statement. City officials are considering leasing a building on Canal Street, the former city bus station, as a temporary shelter with 40 beds. Do we have a cash register sound readily available, Brendan? By any chance?
Cha-ching.
There you go. Cha-ching! That cha-ching is your city taxpayer dollars now going to renovate, fit up, staff, and otherwise provide 40 beds for the drug addicts who once upon a time just invaded the bus shelter and created a camp down there where they can be safe and warm and presumably still continue to do their drugs. Aldermen, get this, have pledged $871,991 to address homelessness using a combination of community development, COVID relief, and affordable housing funds. Brendan, that's your cue to cha-ching. There you go. So now another $1 million of your taxpayer money are there. And oh, yes, we have the ordinance that says that police will enforce the prohibition on camping on public grounds only when the individual is on public property and there is an available overnight shelter. Yeah, they're claiming that that's part of that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but that is contested. Judge Kissinger, who issued the, who tossed the case looking for the injunction to prevent the city from clearing the camp, said the camp poses a, quote, serious public health hazard, citing reports from, oh, you're going to love this, from city officials that Manchester police have received approximately 380 calls for service in connection with the encampment, including at least one death, overdoses, and an incident where a man set a tent on fire. And by the way, that's since the encampment. That's just since November. 380 calls for service to the police for that camp where everybody said they felt safe and protected, and it was really a great community, according to the people who were on the sidewalk. These calls have included alleged assaults and drug use as the weather becomes colder. Okay. Where do we go? That's the number one question people are asking. Well, I honestly don't believe it is the city's responsibility to solve that. But because the city can't help itself, we've got even more news on that front, right? So how much did we talk about here? $871,000. I thought there was another $500,000 somewhere. So I think we're at $1.3 million just in one article. Yeah. Okay, now let's come. Oh, no, that's the next article. So they're pushing the problem around. That's what they always do. And to some degree, this is what a homeless person is saying. To some degree, that is correct. But the problem really is that the city allows these illegal behaviors to reach critical mass before they do anything. And of course, they reach critical mass, whether it's under the Cracker Barrel sign in the South End, whether it's on the courthouse lawn, whether it's on the corner of Pine and Manchester Streets, whether it is down in what they call the bucket on the west side behind those neighborhoods on Douglas Street, or any variety of other areas. They wait for it to be. Remember the prior homeless director of homeless initiatives, Shoshana Green? Yeah. Oh, well, if there are just 2 or 3 of them in the woods or whatnot, we leave them alone. We'll leave them be until they become a problem. Well, if that isn't a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know what is. So rather than dealing with the people who are, trespassing on private property, crapping on picnic tables, pissing in doorways, setting bridges on fire, etc., rather than dealing with them as they are violating the law, we wait in this city for it to reach critical mass till people are literally pounding on tables at City Hall and putting the fear of God into the elected officials to say enough already before we do anything about it. Then we break up the camp. Oh, like the one down on the boat ramp behind Fisher Cat Stadium, right? We wait till the problem hits critical mass. Then we go in, we blow it up, we clean it out, And then we let the behaviors that ultimately lead to the creation of other encampments continue unabated until those encampments form and become a problem. Continuing. Oh, yes. She said the eviction was a shame because a community had developed among the campers. They looked out for each other, especially in the cold weather, she said. Right. That's why just in the last couple of weeks, there have been, or maybe 3 weeks, 2 dead people, a bunch of overdoses, and 380 calls for service since November. Right. So here's what the city is doing. The city now is really, really, really ramping up its efforts to take care of the problem. The city plans to lease a former E&R cleaning building at 39 Beach Street near the corner of Silly Road for around-the-clock shelter that will initially house up to 40. The city will have to hire people to staff it. The Cashin Senior Center. Brendan, the screenshot, please. Do you have any way of making that a little bigger?
No, sorry.
All right. So you know what you're looking at. That red circle with a black pin in the middle of it is where 39 Beach Street is. And there's Silly Road, 2 blocks to the south. Half a block away. So Silly Road is a block and a half away. Half a block to the south is Shasta Street. This is a densely populated residential area. 1 block to the east is Maple Street. 1 block to the west is Union. That's pretty much a business block there. But between Shasta and Silly Road and Maple Street, you've got dozens of houses in that area. Not too far away on the other side of Maple is Howe Street. A little to the north there is Oliver Street. A couple blocks to the north is Somerville Street, Clay Street, but that's a business section of Clay Street. Upshot is in order to fight the crime, the homeless problem now that is plaguing areas of the city, we are expanding where the homeless can go by locating, services in places like the South End within a half a block to a block and a half away from major residential areas. And the city, in addition to spending 500 and what's the number? I think it's 500 and, wait a minute. Where did I write it down? Here it is. It's part 2 of the article. 24-hour homeless shelter on the street of former factory in Beach Street. After taking a look at vacant buildings in the city, 39 Beach Street was identified by officials as the best site for a 24/7 shelter. Fire Chief Cashin told Alderman. A proposed lease from January 20 to April 30 for the site, which awaits approval by City Solicitor Emily Rice, carries a price tag of $518,000. It's almost $175,000 a month for this property, but it covers the rent, the utilities, the cost associated with fit up of the 4,000 square feet of what is a 26,716 square foot building. So I'm thinking the possibilities here are to go from 4,000 square feet to a full 26,000 square feet. So we can have the shelter to end all shelters, a full 24-hour a day, 7-day a week flop house for the vagrants of Manchester. Actually, I should say the vagrants in Manchester, because we all know they come from all over Hell's Half Acre to congregate here in the city. So that they can have showers and meals and everything provided to them at the expense of you, the taxpayer, because they are owed accommodations so that they can live their drug-addled, mentally ill lives at the expense of the taxpayer in a way that is appropriate and considerate of them, even though they probably won't actually use the shelter if the shelter has rules that will prevent them from doing things like shooting up and having sex and doing all kinds of other things you really shouldn't be doing in a group setting. But don't you worry, city officials are on top of it all. And to continue on that story, right? And this, we talked about the bus station already being set up. And the city will have signed a deal with Terrell House on Brook Street to turn that into a homeless shelter for, I think, 14 women. This is one of my favorite quotes. "All of my friends, all of my brothers, where are they going to go?" asked Joselito Cruz Carmona, who is 50. Carmona said he was not living in a tent. He was kicked out of the shelter, probably because he violated rules that he didn't want to live by, and either walks the streets at night or finds a hallway in a residential building to sleep. Folks, that would be called trespassing, and that should get him arrested. So he can sleep in a bed at the Valley Street Jail, where he has a shower and toilets and food and libraries and gyms and medical facilities, mental health facilities, and rehab services. You see? Sorry. Oh, but hey, in addition to the taxpayers having to pay for all of this, now when they show up to clear these sites, they bring plastic storage totes so the homeless can put their stuff that they, have collected from everybody's backyards, front porches, and God knows where else. And in all fairness, probably have had given to them by any number of the dozens of organizations who, well-intended, are deeply misguided by continuing to bring food, clothes, mattresses, sleeping bags, tents, heaters, gloves, coats, hats, boots, and anything else that you would need to comfortably remain in the woods, on a sidewalk, under a bridge, or anywhere else that is considered unhoused. But that's okay. Most of the stuff this woman said will be thrown away because it is rancid and a sheer, utter disaster. Okay? She doesn't like, this woman, Olivia, doesn't like shelters or crowds, she said. So I guess she's not going to be at that 24/7 facility on Beach Street, and probably won't even go to the one at the old bus station. Olivia said she lived in northern New Hampshire and was engaged. After her fiance died, she entered a treatment program. But it was impossible to find housing once she completed the program. Remember, somewhere in northern New Hampshire. It's disruptive about having to move. A lot of us get PTSD. We've been with each other for a long time. Yes, they've been collecting out there for 5 months, and I suppose that's a long time. Look, honestly, my heart breaks for these people who are in the throes of addiction or mental illness, but the truth of the matter is their refusal to get help for their problem is not my mandate to allow them to despoil the community by living in such a way as to create health and public safety hazards on a grand scale everywhere they go. And I noticed, by the way, that none of the sites that they ever talk about are ever north of Webster Street. Hey, maybe if I'm the mayor of Manchester and I see this problem, maybe I go to the county commission and say, Valley Street Jail can hold over 700 inmates, but your ongoing census, since we've had catch and release bail, you're lucky to have 200 inmates in there at any given time. Maybe there's a wing there that you can dedicate. We can get these people off the street. Maybe instead of paying $175,000 a month to a private property owner for 4,000 square feet, holy crap. Maybe instead of doing that, we could throw some money at the county, and the county could chip in some money, because God knows how many of the people on the streets have been let go from the county lockup after being arrested in any one of the 2 cities or 29 towns in Hillsborough County, and come to an arrangement where the homeless can be there, especially when there are emergency shelter needs because of winter, and maybe putting them in a place that has medical facilities, mental health capabilities, rehab services, and all of the food, the food, clothing, shelter, toilets, sinks, beds, all the stuff that we consider part of civilized living in today's society. Maybe that ain't a bad place to be. Maybe, since you could fire a cannon through the YDC, now I don't personally support this, but maybe we should be looking to put some of those people in the very vacant and available facilities up at YDC. I'm sorry, the Sununu Center, which will soon be closed, because they're there. Why not? right? Why? And, well, you'll see in this interview that I'm going to show you what I believe is part of the problem. But the governor has fired back at the 8 mayors, including Joyce Craig, who complained that their problems on the streets were the state's fault for its failure to have a comprehensive plan to deal with these homeless problems. Really? Well, he just fired back and said, collectively, your cities received more than $73 million from the American Rescue Plan and coronavirus relief funds that can directly be used on housing, homelessness, and lower income families. Manchester got $43 million. And yes, the mayor dutifully threw some at low-income housing or affordable housing initiatives. She didn't throw anything at, homelessness per se, but affordable housing initiatives. And funny thing is she also threw a lot of money at things like renovating privately owned corner stores and subsidizing their inventories so that people in the center city could have bananas and carrots and things like that. Robert, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in.
Hello, Rich.
How you doing?
I live at 5 Amory Street, and yesterday when they cleared up that encampment on Manchester and Pine, we had a security detail come to our building to warn everybody that lived here not to let these people in, and if they come up to call the police and get them out of there.
Where do you live again, Robert?
We had a homeless woman in our building a week ago, and she was vandalizing stuff in the community room. So we called the police. The police came, and they talked to her, but they couldn't throw her out because it has to come from the management of the housing authority in order for them to get permission to throw these people out, to throw that woman out. In other words, we the people who live here complained about her, and the police said, well, really nothing we can do unless the housing authority calls us. So what the heck good is it to have, live like this in a private building and have all of this crap going on?
And where do you live again, Robert? Robert, where do you live again?
55 Amory Street.
Oh, in the Parizeau building.
High-rise.
Yeah, the Parizeau high-rise. Yeah, well, frankly, if she was vandalizing the place, I think the cops are full of crap because they don't have a right to vandalize even public property. And, if you watch the show, you remember a show I did last summer where a citizen gave me video of kids who were graffitiing and vandalizing the Piscataquag River Trail. They turned it over to the police, and the police told them, well, even if we could do something, we wouldn't because it was public property and there's no law against, doing that to public property. Which caught my eye because when I was an alderman, I actually pushed through the ordinance that criminalized graffiti on private and public property. So there are times when you just have to wonder whether or not the police even know what they're doing. And I don't necessarily blame the cop who shows up so much as I blame the leadership of the department and the directives that they give about how to handle these things, which to me is crazy. If they're vandalizing that property, if they're inside the building and they're vandalizing your community room or whatever it is, they're destroying or ruining property, that's not up to the management of the housing authority. That's a crime.
Yes, and that woman's belongings, she was homeless.
Yeah.
She had all the stuff outside the elevator in the hallway, and so one of our residents took the stuff and with gloves on, and they put it in the trash for her.
Good for them.
And you know what? The police have an attitude, I think, in this city of a French term that says laissez-faire, which means we can't do nothing.
Yep, laissez-faire. Just leave it be. Yep. Well, Robert, I
thought I'd give you that little information tonight.
Well, I appreciate your calling in to share that. I'm sorry to hear of the trouble because you and your fellow residents at the Parizeau high-rise deserve to be in a safe environment, which is not possible when vagrants are vandalizing the interior spaces where you live.
Thank you, Rich.
Appreciate the call. And therein lies the problem, because they're homeless. They have nothing we can do. And again, I don't think it's the cop on the street's fault. I think this is coming down from the top brass. And I'm not sure that I blame them either, although they should be pushing back against this stuff if they think it's wrong. But this is no doubt coming from Emily Gray Rice, the city solicitor, maybe even the mayor herself. But there it is. For those of you who don't know, the Parizeau high rise, if you go over where the Notre Dame or Bridge Street Bridge intersects with McGregor Street on the west side, it's that big tan high rise. That is an elderly high rise that is reserved for senior citizens, although the federal definition of elderly also includes people who are struggling with substance abuse, mental health, and other issues. And so there have been problems in that and many of our other elderly high rises because of some of the people who are required to be allowed to live there under federal regulation. But there you have it, an elderly building being terrorized by a vagrant who's vandalizing the place, and the response of Manchester Police, a.k.a. the response of the city of Manchester, well, nothing we can do unless the management of the housing authority wants us to do something about it. Well, if that's the case, get the management on the phone. Tell them what's going on and find out if they want them removed. They all have pagers, for Pete's sake. All right, we got a call coming in. We'll wait to see who it is. It's Robert coming back. Okay, Robert, you're back. Oh, different Robert. All right, we got a second Robert. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I want to voice my opinion on a homeless thing.
Please.
You know, I've lived here all my life, and we had a thing called Hobo Jungle.
Yes, we did.
Since forever, but it's just not the same. And, you know, I have a little bit what you call empathy. You know, I drove up Amherst Street today, and there was a guy huddled in a fetal position, you know, right at the foot of the Rex Theater.
Yep.
You know, and that draws, you know, sympathy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my feelings are this, okay? I just heard a portion of your broadcast about the YDC.
Yep.
I forgot even what the hell the name of it is, but Youth Development Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just they've got a very small population.
Yep.
And they've got some empty housing.
They got a lot of empty space up there.
But not only that, you know, I can see the unused housing for emergency.
Yep.
And for people that actually want to come in out of the cold.
Yep.
Okay? But the other thing too, you know, with the every time they clear a tent situation, where do they go?
Right.
Okay? And what I feel, it's not only a Manchester problem. We have the greatest number, but it's also a Hillsborough County problem.
Yep.
They come from everywhere. Okay? When I was growing up, we had a thing called the Hillsborough County Farm.
Yep.
Okay? AKA the poor farm.
Yep. Out in Goffstown.
They have acres and acres and acres. So those who want to choose to live in a tent, give them some acreage to do it. You know, and also look at the sprawling lawn at the YDC.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a lot of these people that literally they want to live in the tent, and I agree they can't live on the street and have somebody walk down the street and trip over, you know, bodies, whatever. Okay, but anyway, the other thing I have to mention, and a little bit maybe sound mercenary here, but I'm not, you know. I have to express it. Every time I see somebody panhandling, every time I see somebody, you know, in quote, in distress, whatever,
mm-hmm.
They're all smoking cigarettes at $70 a carton. Okay?
Yep.
They all have a cell phone.
Yep.
None of them don't have a cell phone.
They're all wearing
right?
$200 pair of sneakers.
And most of them, let me finish, they have a $2,000 mountain bike.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Where's this coming from?
Yeah.
They're on Social Security for a disability or some other something. Okay? And then I knew a young lady that was, you know, in and out of her home and spent most of her time on the street. And then I gave her a ride downtown one time. She knew everybody on the sidewalk.
Yep.
And after that, she needed a ride downtown because they gave her free access, free membership to the Y.
Yep.
So she'd go take a shower. Come on, give me a major break.
Yep, yep. You nailed it, Robert. You nailed it. It's a grift.
Okay, so thank you for letting me vent.
Happy to do
I
it.
got a lot on the brain, and some of it is sympathy, and out of it is like disdain.
Yep.
Somewhere in between.
I got you.
Take
got
care.
you. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the call. All right, folks, if you want to keep calling, we can do that. But I do have an interview I want to show with our new director of homelessness, and it's going to be one of those stop the tape, because as we go through this, there are things that I want to say. So let's get started. B, cue it up. All right, while Brendan is getting the video that I was able to find, my phone was glitching on me. We've got Roland on the phone, and so Roland will take your call while we're getting the video queued up. I apologize for that gaffe on my part. Go ahead, Roland.
Yes, I'm not too sure. Like my memory's not that great anymore, but I don't think we had any big problems with homelessness until they got them out of the woods. You know, they were living by the river. You know, all those woods by the river.
Yeah, down. They
took them all out. One day they went over there and just told them to get the hell out.
Were you talking? How long ago was that, Roland?
Well, a couple of years. Don't you remember? A couple of years ago, they gave them a warning. There was people living by the river. Like where the Grand Street bridges and stuff like that.
Yeah, they cleared that out. I believe.
Don't you remember that they sent the truck over and they bulldozed everything? I think that's when everything started, right?
Well, no.
I don't believe we had any problems with homelessness until they took them all out of the woods. They were happy there and they didn't bother anybody. But if you remember correctly, the city of Manchester, they just bulldozed them out. They told them to get the hell out, and that's when I think the problem started beginning. Am I right or what?
Well, no. The problem that was one of many camp clearouts. The problem really started to accelerate was with the spice epidemic, if you remember that, before the opioid crisis hit. And then the thing that really inflamed it was when Mayor Craig set up that camp underneath the Amoskeag Bridge, where they fenced it in, gave it 24/7 police protection, brought in food 3 times a day, put in porta potties and showers and running water, and gave them tents and sleeping bags. That just brought people in from everywhere, and that really. That put it on the path that we're currently on. But Roland, I appreciate the call. I got the video ready to run, and it's an important one, so I'm going to let you go.
Sure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, Brendan, let's hope I got it right this time.
Crisis gets used a lot these days, but it is applicable on a number of policy fronts, from drugs and addiction to affordable housing to mental health. All 3 of those issues are tangled up in the growing problems New Hampshire cities are facing with homelessness. This morning, we're joined in studio by Adrienne Boulogne, the new director of homeless initiatives in Manchester. Safe to say you've got one of the toughest jobs in New Hampshire right now. We thank you for taking some time to explain to the people and talk to us about what's going on.
Great, happy to be here.
So you're the point person in Manchester. What's the most important thing for people to know about what's going on here and what's being done about it?
So the situation in Manchester is definitely concerning. It's concerning across all cities in the United States and all over the world. And
Stop the tape. So here we go. It's not just a Manchester problem, and this is what they always do. It's a problem everywhere, and we're a helpless victim. Continue.
Doing what a lot of people are doing right now is really trying to get on top of the issue and figure out how best to have kind of short-term solutions and long-term planning so that we can, make the city thrive in every aspect that it needs to, and that includes the folks that are suffering with homelessness. We want them to thrive and rehabilitate and do well.
Stop
and
the
we
tape.
also need the city to thrive. And
Notice we're not talking about any of the short-term solutions or long-term ones that the city has put in place and how they've failed, but we need to come up with stuff without acknowledging what's been done. Continue.
Businesses to thrive here as well.
If there was an easy solution right now, it would have been implemented already. But what makes this situation a little different? When I talk to a lot of people, they're saying, gosh, this is so much worse than usual. What has changed in the last few months?
Yeah, I think all over the country, what has changed in the last few years is important to talk about, just because there's been a real epidemic of substance use disorder happening in the opiate epidemic.
Substance use disorder. It's not
really
illegal drug use.
Into a new loop where substance use is just really complicated issue right now, and it's really caused a lot of homelessness.
Stop the tape. Yeah. So what she's admitting is that the people on the streets overwhelmingly are drug users who are choosing, as Robert said at the forum she's going to reference in a moment, as Robert said, who choose to use drugs actively and therefore they live on the streets. Continue.
And maybe perpetuated homelessness in a lot of situations. Then with the pandemic, we all kind of witnessed the impact that had on the existing epidemic and homelessness in general. It just exacerbated all the issues for the folks.
Stop the tape. How did the pandemic exacerbate homelessness when people were getting not only paid more money to not work than they were working, but landlords weren't allowed to evict you for non-payment of rent. So people making all of this extra money weren't paying rent and there were no evictions. Continue.
That were suffering. It exacerbated issues for folks that were kind of marginally housed or living in poverty, falling into homelessness. So we've really been in a tough time. The social service agencies have also been through a lot, kind of given these different issues I mentioned in the pandemic and having to pivot and shift and manage and staffing issues. And so it's been a really difficult last few years to try to address a growing problem and figure out ways to manage.
Let's blame COVID, despite all of the money that was given to people, these marginal ones who were in danger of being unhoused. How did they become unhoused during a pandemic where they were given money for doing nothing and their landlords couldn't evict them? Continue.
For Manchester, what's on your checklist? What needs to be done and what can be done?
So what needs to be done is, we need to find housing solutions for folks that are suffering with homelessness.
Stop the tape.
Affordable.
This is not a problem of people not being able to find housing. It's a problem of drug-addicted people determined to stay on the streets so they can feed their addiction. Remember, they want the freedom that comes with pitching a tent wherever they want. And that freedom includes being able to do whatever drugs they want, whenever they want to do it, engage in any other behavior that wouldn't be considered civilized in a housing, shelter, emergency, permanent, or otherwise situation. Continue.
Housing in order to manage just folks that have limited incomes and need to have sustainable kind of housing solutions that work for them.
Stop the tape. Yeah, limited incomes. This is something else that you need to know, and you've heard me say it, but I'll remind you again. Part of the outreach effort that the city of Manchester pursues every single day with all of these homeless folks is getting them signed up for state welfare benefits. So they're getting food stamps, they're getting Medicaid, they're getting other cash assistance. You wonder where they're getting money for some of this stuff. It's your tax dollars. Continue.
Subsidized housing that would impact even the homeless population being able to live in housing with little to no income. So
if they want to be in there, which they don't,
shelter solutions in the interim time. We have some emergency shelter in the state, but it's not enough. So statewide, that's a big issue. In Manchester, it's a big issue as well.
Stop the tape.
That we have any.
Now, nobody's corrected me on this, so I assume what I'm being told is true, but one of the reasons why we have reduced capacity at the shelter on Manchester Street is because they're still operating by COVID protocols. They could get a lot more people in that shelter. Continue.
Anywhere between 200 and 250 unhoused homeless individuals in Manchester, kind of living in different encampments. The one that's downtown gets a lot of attention, and it certainly deserves that attention, and we need to be focused on those individuals that are so visibly suffering. But there's a lot of folks that are out in the woods and kind of all around in pockets.
Stop the tape.
Certainly know that.
So she's talked about multiple encampments, and now we're talking about people visibly suffering. Are those the homeless people who are choosing to be on the streets to feed their addictions and other illicit behavior, or is it everybody around them? Continue.
True. It'll be interesting to do our point in time count this year, which happens in a couple weeks, to kind of see what the numbers are like. But we're looking at 250 people that are out there without homes, and that's a large number.
You mentioned that high-profile encampment that's set to be evicted essentially in the days ahead.
Yeah.
The ACLU is already saying, essentially threatening a lawsuit, saying they'd like to maintain
stop the tape. By the way, when they do the count, it'll be interesting to see if they do as they've done in the past and determine how many of them are actually from here in the city of Manchester, have roots, family, or other connections here, or how many of them are from places unknown, which in past counts has been more than 3 out of every 4 of them on our streets. Continue.
Well, what's the response from the city about why these people need to move?
So on the ACLU thing, it's just so fresh that our legal team is reviewing that.
Yeah,
so
this
I'm
was
not going to
before
make any specific comments about
decision,
that
so.
at the moment. But the issue with the folks needing to move from that particular piece of sidewalk is complicated, and it really came down to a decision that, you know, was not kind of a directive from my Office of Homeless Initiatives, but more of a directive from the combination of city offices looking at the public health and safety issues.
Okay, stop the tape. She just passed the buck. She doesn't want to be associated with clearing this camp. It came from other offices. She's trying really hard not to say it was the mayor and the board of aldermen, but it was, because they were responding, and rightfully so, to the fed up business owners and residents of the downtown who stormed City Hall prior to this action being taken. Continue.
Safety of those that are living inside the tents, and we've been closely monitoring that and working with it, but it's also the public health and safety issues for the neighborhood. So we felt a need to
stop the tape. Notice her first concern is not the neighborhood that's being negatively impacted, but the encampment itself. These people get preferential treatment over the rest of us who follow the rules and pay the taxes to pay for these foolish things. Continue.
That sidewalk be kind of reclaimed so that we could manage the safety issues there, and at the same time rapidly trying to deliver solutions for where folks are going to go. So I more than probably
it's
anybody
not our
else
job
in the city
to find
is,
solutions for them.
Very concerned with that. The mayor's very concerned with that. All of us
yeah,
are.
Stop the tape.
We don't.
Why is it our responsibility to find solutions for them? Here's a thought. Why don't we find out where they came from and send them back in an Uber? Let the communities they came from, like the ones I read to you from northern New Hampshire, let those communities figure it out. Continue.
That folks should have to be out there without a resource that works for them, and something that I can really contribute to that conversation is there needs to be a variety of different offerings to folks by way of shelter and support, and emergency shelter will work for some folks. An emergency shelter does not work for other folks, and we see that demonstrated by their
decision
to live in.
Stop the tape. You see, we have to cater to what they want, not what we're willing to do. It's all about figuring out what they want, how they want it, where they want it, when they want it. We have to. What is this? A restaurant with a menu? Oh, I don't like your emergency shelter. I want this. That becomes my mandate. This is the problem. Here you go. You're seeing it. Continue.
Tents, and they do that because of the dignity and privacy that they can afford living by themselves.
No, they don't. They do it because they want to shoot up.
That by themselves and not living in an institutional setting.
And what you're describing there is kind of this balancing act that has to be done between the population you're working with and then the property owners and business owners around there. A lot of them have been coming forward lately saying enough. We can't have, in particular in this instance of the daycare where there were sex acts going on outside where the children are.
Something every 6-year-old should see.
Is it possible to find solutions?
The hell, we do it in the schools now. Why not?
Both ends of that, where you have people feeling safe where they own property and live and work, and then also are able to address the needs of the homeless population. Because right now it seems like it's hard to do both of those things at once.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe that, and I certainly am sympathetic to the business owners' experience. We had a really great meeting on Monday where I sat at the Rex Theater along with our director of overdose prevention to kind of answer questions from our backgrounds, and I found that the community was really, really reasonable in the things that they were asking for, and also there was an outpouring of support and people wanting to help. And I see the vision that I have for how Manchester is going to work together around this problem is having some appreciation that homelessness is an urban problem that is not ever going to be eradicated. And I think that there's a lot of ways that I've seen demonstrated in other communities I've done this work in, where we can be more integrated as a community and appreciate that the homeless individuals are part of our community. They're our neighbors, and we need to determine best ways we can work together. And there might be mutual kind of benefits to both sides of the homelessness part of the community and the housed part of the community, where we can work hand in hand. There might even be, programs that we can put in place where the business district is utilizing folks that are actively in homelessness to work on, washing their windows and tidying their,
Yes, let's exploit the people on the streets, pay them cash under the table, a
flowers and
substandard
different
wage
things
to
that are kind of on the
take care of
street,
our flower
manicuring,
pots and
stuff
wash
like
our
that.
windows.
So there's ways to kind of involve folks and have productive engagement activities that could be mutually respectful and leaning on each other in a community way.
As you add more shelter space, to what extent does that attract more people in need of services and help? Again, another balancing act. In the most extreme form we see with these communities just essentially shipping people here to Manchester to have them provided services.
Yeah, well, we have it happen all the time where when we have emergency shelter beds that are full, we have to send people to other communities. So that's a real reality that has to happen. But we also know that Manchester has a particular pull for people coming in for all kinds of reasons, right? I mean, we're an urban center. We offer a lot of things. We have a lot of services here. We have a lot of service providers here. So there's probably always going to be an attraction for people to come to the city. And I know for the homeless population, they end up where they can get their needs met. And their needs are varied, and sometimes it's services like emergency shelter that draws them, and sometimes it's the urban living environment that supports the survival behaviors that they have that suit them at the time. So, I mean, it's always going to be a draw to some respect, and I think we need to accommodate who's in our city, and we need to...
Stop it right there. We need to accommodate who's in our city. Notice she did not answer his very direct question about if you add more services and shelter space, won't you get more homeless? She totally pushed by that question. And you heard what she said. It's our response. We have to live with it, folks. We're an urban center, and homeless people just naturally gravitate to urban areas like Manchester, as if to say there's really nothing we can do. And then she wraps it up with saying, yep, we have to find a way to accommodate them and meet their needs. And she said they come here because we have the services. Folks, it's that simple, and we have to stop doing the things that bring people here for the reasons that they come, and that is to get the services. And what she's really saying when she's talking about an urban environment and the things for their survival skills and all that is, yep, it's easy to score the drugs here too. And when you have a city that's unwilling to enforce its ordinances and state laws, this is what you get. They are fooling you about the problem. If this continues, it will only get worse. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud of having the audience. Thanks so much for being there. Good night.